Hello from Melbourne, and welcome to this launch of The Singing Bones and also exhibition of a few works. I have one of them here with me, Mother Holler, who's responsible for seasonal change. She's actually one of the good characters, described in the story as having frighteningly big teeth. So if nothing else, you're staring at this while I speak is a reminder of when you last went for a dental checkup. Um, anyway, we're enjoying beautiful sunny weather here in Melbourne at the moment. Thanks for the loan, and I think we'll take it into summer if you don't mind before we give it back. But for the moment, just to say a few words about this book and the exhibition. Firstly, as I mentioned at my last event at the Illustration Cupboard, where I was also absent, I'm probably completely asleep right now and yet still speaking to you, which I think is a perfect analogy for being an author or artist, especially when introducing a body of work such as this, which is more at home in a dream than in waking hours. And I could say that's why I'm wearing pajamas at the moment to my own book launch, but the truth is that I work from home. To say a little bit about the work itself, because it's quite an unusual one for me, it's probably been the most enjoyable project I've worked on and something of a throwback to childhood. As a kid, I did far more sculpting than painting or illustration, and I'd often come home from school and spend the afternoon in the backyard hacking away at a piece of rock or plaster or stone or making something out of clay. And I did this with no particular purpose in mind. And I think that's probably the basis for all good art, is to, do something in a purposeless and disinterested way, just for the hell of it. And when approaching this project, I was so stuck by how to interpret Grimm's fairy tales that I guess I resorted to that old childhood muscle memory and just going at it with a kind of intuitive impulse that normally I would apply more thought to, but in this case I just thought, well, I'm just going to make these funny little sculptures and see what happens. And I was happily surprised by the results, and I hope you are too. I also grew up with Grimm's fairy tales like most kids, but frankly, I did not know what to make of them. Late 20th century Western Australia is a far cry from medieval villages and Germanic forests. So, as a professional illustrator, I did try to approach Grimm's fairy tales a number of times. It's such an obvious subject for somebody who winds up illustrating things for young people. But I had a lot of trouble, and I think part of it was a difficulty in connecting with the stories. They just felt so fundamentally foreign, and perhaps it's only after years of working in a mode of surrealism and foreignness and being fascinated by cultural difference in my other stories that I was able to come back to this work and attack it with a certain amount of confidence. So, as I said, it's some of the most intuitive work I've done, arriving unusually naturally and easily, with far less hand-wringing that is usually associated with my projects here in this little cell I call a studio. And the result is that the work looks really strange to me, which is actually quite ideal. I was often working on these sculptures nose to the grindstone, and then stepping back and looking at them and just thinking, what the F? And I think that's a really good reaction from one artist to their own work, and it usually means you're on the right track. If you can say that in a positive way, where, what is this thing, but I still like it. That said, I'm not even sure how to interpret some of this work. I'm still not sure about the original fairy tales. They puzzle me hugely, but I'll leave that for you, the readers and gallery visitors, to figure out. Okay, so a number of thank yous are in order because this was a hugely collaborative project, even though I spent a lot of time locked away carving and modelling things, in a certain amount of privacy. When it comes to publication and displaying work, it's quite a task to have ideas come into some material embodiment. So firstly, of course, thanks to John Huddy, Daphne, Jessica and the team at Illustration Cupboard for hosting not just this launch but also my recent exhibition and visit to London in June. You've always been so terrific and respectful of my work, not to mention excellent guides for this wonderful English theme park you all so charmingly call London. To my German editor Klaus Humann, and to Philip Pullman, who reawakened my interest in Grimm fairy tales originally around 2012. Philip in particular setting the attractive challenge of writing in his introduction to Grimm's Tales that these stories do not much benefit from illustration. And this is very challenging because I happen to agree with it. But that's, of course, never stopped me from doing things in the past. And certainly I think I've succeeded and failed in different respects. But who's to say which is which? And I'll leave that to you to decide. Thanks also to Alan and Unwin in Melbourne, and to my agent Sophie Byrne, who assisted with initial support and editing for this project, to my wife Inari Kuru, as always, for her design and photography advice, and to Jack Zipes, whose sheer enthusiasm from the outset was both flattering and very confidence boosting when working on a book in a format which I was very uncertain about how it would be received. Which leads, of course, to a big appreciation to Walker Books for taking this title to the next level and producing such an excellent edition, due largely to the tireless work of Neem Tar, whom I've had the privilege of working with for a number of years. Her only fault is that she's terminally modest, but she's a real design powerhouse, and I look forward to many more projects with you in the future. Many thanks to Karen, Denise, Ben, Sarah and the Walker Books team, who've all been so warm and delightful to work with, and such a pleasure to visit all too briefly during my last jaunt to London. I'm also fortunate to be part of a specky new imprint called Walker Studio, inspired by a real dedication to beautifully produced printed books. And I think in an age of screen culture, the return to tactile and very well-designed objects is always extremely welcome, and certainly a stimulus for my own sculptural tangent here, reminding both myself and others that art is primarily about objects. It's about ideas fused into physical things, which galleries such as the Illustration Cupboard also serve to remind us. And secondly, that the spectrum of artwork from childhood through to adulthood is just that. It's a spectrum without borders, and quite a complex one. There is nothing at all simple about creative work for young readers, and nothing at all exclusive or elitist for that matter. It's all just art. And one reason I love working in this particular cultural community is actually the lack of pretension when it comes to the visual arts. I just find it's such a wonderful group of people who are dedicated to the idea that art is just something that moves you and makes you think, and it doesn't matter what form it takes or who it happens to be for. It either works or it doesn't. I like that very practical outlook. So I'm also pleased to be on the inaugural list with other artists as part of Walker Studio, who also help expand our perception of these things and where different forms of illustration sit within broader culture. So on the inaugural list, Norman Messenger, James Brown, Ingela P. Arrhenius. So I look forward to seeing their books very much. And of course, big thanks with my own title to Neil Gaiman, who so generously wrote an introduction to this new volume while nursing a newborn. Among so many other things, he's very good at typing with one hand. If nothing else, The Singing Bones is a book for new generations, and dedicated to my own daughter Vida, who was born in June 2013. Let these kids try and make sense of all these warped and kooky stories that we've also inherited from a string of mysterious ancestors. Incidentally, if you're wondering why there's a big skull on the cover of The Singing Bones, that was Vida's idea. As a baby, she just loved skulls. Don't know why. She now enjoys dressing up like a bat and currently is very interested in what she calls rock playgrounds, which are known to the rest of us as graveyards. She also likes piglets and ponies, just in case you're wondering, so turning out to be a very well-rounded human being. Finally, big thanks to the readers and art lovers who turn up to these things and make the whole enterprise viable. We hope that we're serving you well and giving you plenty to think about, to laugh about, and also be a little creeped out about, this being a case in point. Thanks very much. Hope to see you all in London at the very next opportunity, and enjoy the show. Bye.